The party was over. The fun was done. That was the mood across the global auto industry in the early 1970s. High compression engines, gone. Hood scoops and racing stripes, replaced by emission controls and plastic bumpers. Muscle cars, left behind in the rearview mirror, traded for fuel economy and catalytic converters. Across the pond, things weren't much better. Great Britain's once proud car industry was staggering, slowed by strikes, bad decisions, and rising competition from Japan. If American performance cars drove into a ditch, British performance dove right off the white cliffs of Dover. It was the end of an era. But then, something roared back. Through the morning fog came the scream of a Ford V8. Not in a Mustang or a GT40, but in a delivery van. The Ford SuperVan wasn't a production vehicle. It was a publicity stunt. A ridiculous, brilliant V8-powered publicity stunt, born from boredom, racing heritage, and marketing magic. And over the next 50 years, this absurd idea would evolve into one of the most bizarre and beloved series of vehicles ever to wear the blue oval. In the midst of Britain's automotive gloom, Ford pulled off something truly insane. They stuffed a GT40 heart into a delivery van and called it SuperVan. The idea was simple: shock people into paying attention. The execution, not so simple. Ford's motorsport boss, Stuart Turner, greenlit the project with a few pounds from the commercial truck marketing budget. He handed it over to Terry Drury, an engineer who had worked on the original GT40 and was now running his own racing shop. Drury's team had just 4 months. They widened a Cooper Monaco race chassis, mounted a first-generation Ford Transit shell on top, and dropped in a fire-damaged 302 Windsor V8 pulled from a retired GT40. This wasn't a regular van with a loud exhaust. It was a race car in disguise. The engine? A 435 horsepower beast with Gurney Westlake heads and 4 Weber downdraft carbs, exhaling through GT40-style upswept headers. The sound? Absolutely feral. When it debuted at Brands Hatch in 1971, SuperVan looked like a plumber's van, but cornered like a Le Mans winner. It could hit 150 miles per hour and do 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. Nothing else on the road, van, car, or supercar, looked or sounded like it. The mission? Promote the humble transit van. That success made it impossible for Ford to stop there. More than a decade later, they decided to resurrect the SuperVan idea, but this time with the ambition of turning it into a true racing machine. SuperVan 2 was born with the same outrageous spirit, but instead of a racing improv, it was a fully engineered performance vehicle from the ground up. Leading the project once again was Stuart Turner, the mastermind behind the first SuperVan, now back as Ford's head of motorsport. This time, he had the time, the budget, and a world-class engineering team. Renowned race car designer Tony Southgate was tasked with developing an aluminum and carbon fiber monocoque chassis. Instead of adapting a real transit shell, SuperVan 2 featured a custom-built 7/10 scale fiberglass body designed to match the chassis. The design included massive side air intakes, oversized front and rear spoilers, and Venturi tunnels in the floor, all working to generate enough aerodynamic downforce to keep the flying brick glued to the track. Powering it was a 3.9-liter Cosworth DFLV8 engine, a descendant of the legendary DFV-F1 motor, revving to nearly 9,000 RPM and producing around 600 horsepower. When it debuted at Donington Park in 1984, SuperVan 2 proved it wasn't just for show. It hit 176 miles per hour at Silverstone and carved corners like a proper GTP race car. After more than a year touring circuits across Europe, it was retired from active duty. But that wouldn't be the last time this chassis would see action. Nearly a decade later, Ford brought the SuperVan 2 chassis back, not to relive the past, but to push the concept even further. They called it SuperVan 3, and this time it would be powered by an engine that once screamed on the world's greatest F1 circuits. To promote the facelifted 1994 Transit, Ford didn't build a new vehicle from scratch. Instead, they reused the monocoque chassis from SuperVan 2 and fitted it with an all-new fiberglass shell that matched the updated Transit styling. But the real story was under the skin. The old Cosworth DFL engine was replaced with a Cosworth HB 3.5-liter V8, the same type of engine used in early 1990s Formula One cars. With a tight 75-degree V angle, it could rev to an astonishing 13,000 RPM and deliver up to 650 horsepower, making SuperVan 3 the most powerful iteration yet. The sound coming from this transit-shaped missile? Pure F1 madness. But that performance came with serious complexity. The HB engine was temperamental and required a highly trained support crew to keep it running properly, which limited how often SuperVan 3 could appear in public. It showed up at a few major events before being stored away again. At one point, even repainted to look like a British postal van. It wasn't until 2005, for the Transit's 40th anniversary, that Ford revived SuperVan 3 once more, this time with a 3.0-liter supercharged V6 engine that was still potent, but far easier to manage. That year, the van toured across the UK at various events before settling once again into Ford of Britain's Heritage Collection, awaiting the day its strange journey would continue. And then, that day finally came. Nearly 30 years since its last appearance, Ford officially awakened the SuperVan legend once more. But this time, it wasn't powered by a traditional race engine. It was driven by something from the future: electricity. In 2022, Ford unveiled SuperVan 4, a fully electric transit with 4 independent motors and a high-performance battery system, delivering nearly 2,000 horsepower. Capable of accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 2 seconds, this delivery van was faster than many modern hypercars. But Ford wasn't just chasing speed. They were out to break records. In early 2023, SuperVan 4 was upgraded to version 4.2 with a 3-motor configuration, 900 pounds of weight reduction, and refined aerodynamics, ready to take on the world. Its first stop was the legendary Mount Panorama circuit in Bathurst, Australia, where SuperVan 4.2 shattered the lap record with a blistering 1-minute 56-second run, dethroning a Mercedes that had set the record just a week earlier. Next, it traveled to the United States to tackle the grueling Pikes Peak hill climb, a treacherous course with 156 turns and massive elevation change. Behind the wheel was Le Mans legend Romain Dumas, who pushed the transit-shaped EV up the 12.4-mile course in just 8 minutes and 47 seconds, smashing the open-class record. Even more shocking, it was only 7.6 seconds behind the overall winning time, a result that stunned the motorsport world. With SuperVan 4, Ford was no longer just promoting transit. They were pushing further than ever into the final frontier of electric performance. Looking back on this half-century journey, it becomes clear that SuperVan was never just a series of concept vehicles. It was a mirror of Ford's ambition, creativity, and daring spirit across the decades. SuperVan 1 was a shock to the system, a delivery van stuffed with a GT40 engine, created just to make the world take a second look at the humble Transit. SuperVan 2 took things further, a product of true engineering, with a monocoque chassis, endurance-grade powertrain, and race-spec aerodynamics. SuperVan 3 pushed the concept to the edge, an F1 engine screaming inside a van body. But its brilliance made it too complex for regular use. And finally, SuperVan 4 proved what the future looks like, where electric power isn't just clean, it's the definition of ultimate performance. But through it all, one thing remained constant: audacity. SuperVan didn't follow logic, didn't need a reason, and didn't care about market fit. It existed for one purpose: to blow minds. In a world of increasingly similar, safe, and predictable cars, SuperVan was a reminder that there's still room for the wild, the ridiculous, and the truly inspiring. And maybe that's why, even though it was never mass-produced, SuperVan became a legend, not just of Ford, but of boundless creativity in the mechanical world. SuperVan isn't a car you can buy, and it was never something Ford planned to mass-produce. But that's exactly what makes it special. For over 50 years, SuperVan has continuously evolved, from a speed stunt to a symbol of elite engineering, and finally, a statement about the future of electric performance. It's not a commercial product. It's a declaration that Ford can build anything, even turn a delivery van into one of the fastest machines on Earth. And maybe that's what we love about cars, not just the speed, but the stories, the bold ideas, and the ability to do what no one else dares to try. Which version of SuperVan impressed you the most? Share your thoughts below. And if you want to keep exploring machines this wild and wonderful, don't forget to hit subscribe, ring the bell, and join us on the next adventure.